So my name is Josephine Cannella-Krehl. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I've been licensed as a medical professional in the state of Florida for going on 35 years. I started out as a substance abuse psychotherapist in the late 80s, early 90s. My passion led me to working with critically, chronically, and terminally ill patients and guiding them through the dying process and then offering bereavement services to their families. Probably about in 2006, 2007, my dad had been diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, so we did all of the things. We did surgery, we did radiation, we did chemotherapy. And then a couple of years later, he had a reoccurrence. And after surgery and chemo and radiation, when we got his terminal diagnosis, his radiation oncologist recommended another round of chemotherapy.
That's so brutal.
For a man that they said really only had 3 to 6 months to live. So I started looking into alternative treatments to traditional. And that's when clinical cannabis came on my radar.
Wow.
And you were using that, the idea was you were going to use it as a curative or as a palliative?
Well,
whatever.
Anything.
Yeah.
All of it and any of it.
Yeah. Whatever you could get.
So I took a deep dive. Back then there was not a lot of information. That was well before we had a program in Florida. I connected with some of the really world experts in cannabis. I was very blessed. But, you know, my 85-year-old Sicilian father
How did he feel about it?
Not use marijuana because it was against the law. You know, even though we were willing to break the law, he wasn't. So sadly, I had to navigate him through the dying process.
Talk about a blessing of a skill set to have, though, right?
Yeah. So I had only the traditional pharmaceuticals, took him through the process, and then I got pissed. And I happened to live in Tallahassee. As a clinical social worker, I've advocated for marginalized and vulnerable populations for, you know, going on 4 decades now. So I said, okay, well, it's against the law. I guess it's time to go change the law.
Absolutely.
Hell yeah.
I was working in hospice up in Tallahassee at the time, and I started opening, because I was like, well, if it really helps with all of the things that they say that it helps with, I must have patients who are using this. So when you come into hospice, you are assigned a social worker, and the first 3 days of admission, the social worker has to go in and do something that we call a biopsychosocial assessment. And
God knows about that.
That's the model that I use to treat my patients. Normally PTs use like a biomechanical, but we're biopsychosocial and spiritual.
Yes,
right?
Right, well, that's part of it. Body, mind, and spirit, right? So there was I decided in my assessment I was going to add an informal category of alternative treatments for palliation, which means just to make somebody more comfortable. And I provided a safe space. And, you know, just asked, like, well, you know, what else do you do to help you deal with your uncomfortable symptoms? I was like, you know, some people use acupuncture, some people use acupressure. I was like, heck, I've even heard that some people use marijuana and it helps them feel better.
You, like, lead them into it?
Yeah.
And this is to the patients in the hospice?
To the patients in hospice. And as soon as you open the door and make it okay, because everybody's afraid, right? So if your medical provider is now opening the door, all of a sudden, patient after patient after patient was telling me, well, I use it, but don't tell the doctor. Well, I use it, but don't tell my nurse.
It's like a little secret.
Or don't
I
tell my
use
family,
it.
probably, too, right? Like, don't tell my daughter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I was going back, and by then I had already gone to, and I'm going to give a shout out to Florida Cannabis Action Network.
Shout out.
We are one of the leading legislative education entities in the state.
Okay.
Wait, what's it called? Florida Cannabis?
Florida Cannabis Action Network.
Action Network.
www.flcan.org.
There it is. All right.
There you go.
And another shout out to Patients Out of Time. Patients Out of Time is an organization that has actually been educating medical professionals on clinical cannabis therapeutics for over 25 years.
Wow. Medical professionals like physicians? Like
Physicians, nurses, clinical social workers for continuing education. They, because we've been legal in California since the 90s, right?
That's right, yeah. They were the first state to legalize marijuana under physician supervision. It's a trivia question.
I read that somewhere 20,000 times.
Yep.
So I went to my very first clinical cannabis therapeutics conference. It was out in Oregon, Portland, and I started learning about the therapeutic value of cannabis. And I was like, well, we're making our dying people criminals. And I live in Tallahassee, and I have this body of evidence that is, research-based from around the world.
Yep.
It's like, oh, I guess it's time to go. People won't use it, my dad, because it's against the law, so I guess it's time to go change some laws.
Pulled a Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. What is that movie? Jimmy Stewart?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
That's old.
I think...
She's like, wait, what?
I don't know.
And she's like
a little bit older than me.
She's like Jimmy Stewart. Who? It's a Wonderful Life.
You even gave me the same look though. You're like, who is this old ass?
It took me a minute.
I don't even know if that's the name of the movie. I think that's the name of the movie.
I
have no idea what
but
you're
I do know what you're
referencing.
talking
It's
about.
just like some corny old Americana thing.
All right.
Okay, in other words, he's calling me old.
No.
Was there a catalyst
I'm
of
calling
change in
me
that
old.
movie?
Probably.
Okay, got it.
He's probably like, I got to go to Washington to change marijuana laws. I'll bet that's what it is.
Like,
It
how did we
probably
get
was.
here? Okay, yeah.
In the back of his mind, Jimmy Stewart was like, I gotta get to Washington and change this bullshit.
I'm sure that's exactly what Josephine
This is
sounded like.
fucking garbage. No, that's Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah, I know. But
It's what I sounded like in my head.
No, you were doing it. I knew it. I knew it.
that's funny.
So anyways, that's a bit of a long lead into our conversation. So the original question was, how did I come to the Flowery?
Yes,
And
that's what I
I
wanted to
started with Once Upon a Time. So I met our COO, Mike, and he recruited me to work in physician and clinical community relations, same role, with one plant. Then, fast forward, we both left one plant, and in February of 2022, he became the COO of the Flowery in January of 2022. And when he became the COO, we were just ramping up. I wasn't part of the team yet, we're just ramping up operations and putting people in place. So he reached out to me and asked if I would be interested in now joining him for our second MMTC together. And I said, sure.
Yeah, right.
So I've been with the Flowery for almost a year and a half now. And that's how I came to be with the Flowery.
Tell us how you feel about synthetic THC.
This is a very unpopular opinion in Florida.
Our favorite.
And
Bring it.
I
that
happen
shit.
to be okay because I am a truth speaker. And sometimes when you speak the truth, it's not always popular.
Well, that's okay.
Yep.
This is your platform. Tell us. Yeah.
So I'm not here to be
We're-
popular. I'm here to set the record straight.
We're terribly unpopular right now.
Yeah, we talk about opinionated things, and we have our opinions about things. So don't worry, this is a safe space for sharing opinions and talking truthfully.
And we have our 6 subscribers right now.
Yes.
7, because
7.
I'm going to be number 7.
That's right. Get in the loop.
Yeah, excellent. All right.
So let's just kind of set the groundwork. Delta 8 THC is a naturally occurring cannabinoid in the cannabis plant.
Okay.
It, however, is produced in such small quantities naturally in the plant that it's really not feasible to extract it and to use it clinically. So Delta 8 THC has medicinal value to it. It has therapeutic value to it.
Okay.
What's happened, and I say that it's a function of prohibition, is because people don't have safe and legal access to Delta 9 THC. And so the shift really came with the Federal Farm Act. When we changed the definition of what hemp was, because historically hemp was used for industrial purposes.
Yeah, like
and
rope, right?
Hemp was, the long stocky plants that were used for rope and
George
really
Washington.
Everything, ship sails. People say that the original Declaration of Independence was written on hemp paper.
Hemp paper, yeah.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
So everything that can be made with plastic basically can also be made with hemp. And so with the passage...
Calm your face down.
That's wild.
I know it is.
Wow.
With the passage of the Federal Farm Act, there was a legal definition change of what hemp is.
Interesting.
So it became defined by its THC content in the plant. So to be hemp legally under federal guidelines, a plant has to have 0.3% THC or less.
And if it has more, it's considered
marijuana. What happened with the passage of the Federal Farm Act is, in essence, it legalized the varietal, because hemp is cannabis sativa L. Marijuana is cannabis sativa L. So they are the same plant.
okay.
Botanically speaking, they're just a different varietal.
Gotcha.
With the passage of the Federal Farm Act, hemp was removed from Schedule 1 under the DEA.
Okay.
So it's not illegal.
Hemp, the plant, is not federally illegal. States have different guidelines. Florida has its own guidelines. You have to, apply to be a hemp farmer and all of the things that goes along with that. So what happened was...
Go on.
The suspense.
is that...
Tune in next week, folks.
Folks in the hemp industry wanted to get into the cannabis game.
Sure.
So started extracting CBD from hemp because hemp is higher in CBD.
Is that where CBD comes from, mostly, primarily?
No, because there's also
Strands from
traditional cannabis, hemp varietals as well. CBD varietals as well. But what they discovered was that you can start with CBD that's naturally extracted from the hemp plant, and you can apply chemical processes that will convert or synthesize into these, and what I call them is Franken-fake cannabinoids,
Okay.
because you're not naturally extracting it from the plant. you're taking one cannabinoid, you're turning it into another cannabinoid.
Yeah.
So you're taking one that's not psychotropic. CBD is psychoactive. Some people say it's not, but it is.
Okay.
Because the definition of psychoactivity is it influences the brain. So if CBD can help people with depression, it's influencing the brain, right?
Okay.
So it's psychoactive because it has influences on the brain. It's not psychotropic like THC is.
Gotcha.
So you don't get that high. But if you take the CBD and then you synthesize it through chemical processes and you turn it into delta-8 THC, now it does have psychotropic effects.
Psychoactive and psychotropic.
Psychoactive and psychotropic because delta-8 THC and delta-9 THC are like cousins, right?
Yeah.
They're just like a molecule off from each other.
Delta-9 is the cool cousin that everyone likes hanging out with.
That's the one we like. Yeah, right?
And delta-8 is the kind of weird,
like
lumpy one where you're like, oh, he's still pretty cool.
Well, it's the one now that people can purchase over the counter without a medical.
You can go to any vape shop. Not that I know firsthand, but
and so
I've heard about it. Yeah.
As part of Florida Cannabis Action Network, when we were implementing these laws, we were up there and were the voice for the patients, and we really pushed for third-party laboratory testing. Delta-8 is synthesized through chemical processes, and it's not just delta-8 because now there's THCP and THCV and THC10 and all of these other cannabinoids that are being synthesized. And my personal belief is that the reason that we're seeing this promulgation of all of these minor cannabinoids that are being turned into one thing, the THC variety, from the CBD variety, is because delta-9 THC is still prohibited unless you have a medical card. And a lot of folks, for a lot of reasons, don't want to get their medical card. Some people can't because of the types of jobs that they do.
Right.
Cost, too.
Cost. But my biggest issue, number one is it's being marketed and advertised by and large as an extract from the plant, and it's not. It's being turned from one thing into another. So the biggest issue to me with all of it is it doesn't go through the same stringent testing processes and regulatory structure that is present with the medical cannabis that you get from a dispensary.
Like the Flowery.
So then do you end up getting like dangerous products or low quality products?
I will say that there are products for sale all over Florida that pose a potential, and I always say potential harm to human health.
So
are there some good, safe use products out there? Absolutely. Are there others that are not? Heck yeah. They're not, because they're not under the same guidelines, they're not necessarily tested for residual pesticides.
Oh, gotcha.
They're not necessarily tested for chemical contaminants.
And everything sold from a dispensary is
absolutely
tested for all of it. So that's the benefit
because
of going
we're
to a dispensary.
run under the Department of Health.
Right. So
the hemp industry is regulated by the Department of Agriculture because it's a crop. You know, it's not medicine. A lot of the hemp retailers do make medical claims, which they're not supposed to be making medical claims.
Right.
But we know that there are some of these minor cannabinoids that are being created not in a GMP, good manufacturing process facility.
So it's like bathtub gin.
Some people are making them in labs. Some people are making them in the kitchen and in the bathtub. Like, I kid you not.
What? Like, what are they making in the bathtub?
I have heard rumors.
Hold on. No, yeah, go ahead.
You don't even want to know.
Yep, we
what
do.
I've heard.
Yeah, I gotta know.
Like, and I don't have my hands on the evidence. I usually don't say anything out loud until I have hands on the evidence. But the source that I received it from is that there was like scrotum germs.
Ew, what?
Are there germs specific to scrotums?
Scrotum germs.
Today,
I guess somebody was making one of these products and had a little itch and scratched and then went back.
God.
And so, especially for people who have, compromised immune systems.
Yeah.
Like, we need to ensure that what is going in and on the body is safe.
It should be like food. Like what you eat and what you drink, you should make sure that you're buying food or going to restaurants that are reputable and care about the quality of the products that they make.
So
Same thing. It's like
even if you're not immunocompromised, you still don't want to be eating people's scrotum germs.
Yeah.
I know,
Yeah.
that was a really drastic one, but I just learned that.
I'm sure they loved it. They're eating it up.
I just
Not the germs,
learned. I just learned that last week, so I had to just kind of toss it out. Initially, I was just worried about like
Holy
pesticide
hell. Yeah.
residuals and chemical contaminants. When I heard that one, I was just like, no.
Well, what about lacing
no.
too? That's a problem.
No, what is it?
Lacing things. Like, out there, if you were to not go to a dispensary and buy, stuff off of the street, you don't know what that's laced with or what that might also be contained. I mean, especially, there's different epidemics and,
They're
trends going on out
fentanyl
there.
and everything these days.
Yeah, they are.
So
We're actually, because I am licensed under the Department of Health, we did get an advisory that they're starting to find some fentanyl in street cannabis too.
It's not surprising.
There have been some cases. So yes, that's another really big concern.
And another reason why you should go to the Flowery.
That's right.
But so that's my biggest concern, is really from a public health standpoint with some of these minor cannabinoids that you can purchase at a gas station. I'm not like trashing Delta 8 or, these other minor cannabinoids. My concern is the processing and the lack of oversight, which can lead to potentially unsafe, naive consumers, they don't know what questions to ask. You go to the store, you can buy it, and we just think, oh, it must be safe. And some of these are not. And I've been at events where people have given out Delta 8 gummies to customers, because you can just hand them out as samples, The only people who can't do that are the medical providers.
Sure.
But the hemp retailers, they can hand out stuff all day long.
Sure.
So I've been at these events where a Delta 8 gummy has been given out and somebody's taken it and they've had a terrible adverse reaction that then I have, I kind of infuse myself in a situation because that's what I do, right? I help suffering people be more comfortable.
Yeah.
If somebody's having a horrible reaction, paranoia. I had a friend that was actually up in North Carolina and she couldn't get legal access to Delta 9 THC. So, but somebody sold her a Delta 8 pre-roll. Okay. So with the hemp flower, usually what's done is it's sprayed with Delta 8. And then she smoked it and she was freaking out. We have a friend group chat and we started getting these crazy, there's giant purple spiders in my RV coming after me. She was having
She
full hallucinogenics.
She didn't have actual spiders in there though, right?
She did not have actual spiders in there.
Psychoactive.
That was a super. So she was hallucinating.
Wow.
I sat with a gentleman, who was having heart palpitations, and his blood pressure dropped, and he felt like he was going to pass out, and he couldn't breathe. All from a gummy that somebody handed. Hey, this is really cool. You're going to love it.
So this is even more reason to come to the Flowery or a place like this. Don't trifle.
A cautionary tale of don't just eat something someone hands to you or that you can buy at a gas station. Yeah, you can do that, but you shouldn't.
It's not terribly wise.
So that's my biggest issue, is that I really do believe, and it kind of from another perspective, it kind of bugs me. Because from day one, I have been an advocate for this sacred plant, and let's make it available to people. And I've been telling the legislature for going on 11 years, nobody's ever overdosed, death by overdose.
Yeah, it doesn't happen.
It's a plant. It's safe. If you use it mindfully, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And now I'm in a position where I have to speak out against the plant that I have been so vehemently defending for so long.
Yeah.
So on a personal note, it kind of pisses me off. I'm I don't really like to have to say, let's prohibit the use of something, or and I'm not really a prohibitionist. I don't think making Delta 8 illegal is going to solve our problem at all.
But they got to figure out some way to make sure that you're not getting crazy stuff.
But we do need to have legislation, and we did have a bill this year that was introduced that I thought initially would have done some really great things. For instance, it would have legally defined synthetic cannabinoids, because under Florida law right now there is no definition.
Oh.
There's just the definition of THC. There's not a legal definition for synthesized cannabinoids. This bill would have done that. But what happened was the hemp industry came out strong. They raised, I want to say it was over $1 million that they contributed to political action committees. And if people don't know that money is the main driver of laws that are made, then they just haven't been part of a process, and that's okay, because before I walked into the Capitol, I was like, it's a bunch of smart people making good laws for the people and keeping us safe. That's not the way laws are made.
Nope.
Schoolhouse Rock needs to be redone, because it's not just the bill on Capitol Hill. So I think that some real regulatory structures need to be put in place. Some legit testing, some defining of what synthesized cannabinoids are, some GMP practices put into place and mandated when we are making these types of substances. And I think the goal really needs to be keeping people safe.
Absolutely.
So are you going back to Washington sometime soon?
I've been to Washington a handful of times.
Okay.
The Florida legislature is really my jam.
Tallahassee.
Yeah, up in Tallahassee. So I'm actually, I'm hopeful that next year we'll see more hemp legislation come and put into place that have some patient and consumer. It's not even patients at this point, because you don't have to have a card to get things over the counter, hemp derived. We need some consumer protections.
So where can people go if they're watching this to support these efforts?
www.flcan.org, Florida Cannabis Action Network. We are the #1 longest standing educational legislative body in the state of Florida and beyond. Making some real suggestions and educating our lawmakers on how to keep Floridians safe. And for this sacred plant, because my main goal really is to return the sacred plant to her people. But now that it's been a little convoluted, we need to put in some extra safety measures. I still believe if people had safe and legal access to Delta 9 THC, who would want Delta 8?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, well, I don't know, but
I mean, again, it's hanging out with the cool cousin or the weird one.
Yeah, you want the
cool
real
kid.
thing, like the good. Yeah, exactly. Well, thank
Appreciate
you, Josephine,
you guys.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Everything you never knew you wanted to know about synthesized cannabinoids.
Amazing.
And then some.
Work, so thank you.
I-35 with the top down, quick to tell a hater they should get like me. Seem like everybody wanna be the boss, but it costs and these lames ain't shit like me. Drop a couple bands on the